One of the most bitter rivalries in the UFC right now will have the score settled this Saturday at UFC 305 in Perth, Australia for the UFC middleweight title. Israel Adesanya versus Dricus du Plessis. This beef goes all the way back to before this face-off right here at UFC 290. Dricus, throughout his UFC career, was saying that he wanted to be the first African champion that trained and lived and earned their belt while doing it out of Africa. Israel Adesanya has taken offense to this time and time again, saying that he was disrespectful towards himself, Israel Adesanya, Kamaru Usman, and Francis Ngannou, who were all African-born UFC champions. Now, to explain what happened, Dricus du Plessis is from South Africa, born, raised, started MMA there, trains there, lives there all the time. Israel Adesanya was born in Nigeria, eventually moved to New Zealand, spent a large portion of his fighting career in China, but mostly lives in New Zealand. Francis Ngannou, former UFC heavyweight champion, went from Cameroon to France and then the US for his training, where he became UFC heavyweight champ. And Kamaru Usman was born in Nigeria, moved to the US, did college wrestling in the US, has been in the US for his entire adult life, at least for his entire adult life. And Dricus du Plessis would be the first African-born, bred, trained from the start, earned their belt, took it back there, African champion in his eyes. Now, this came to a head at UFC 290, which was Alex Volkanovski against Yair Rodriguez, International Fight Week of 2023. Israel Adesanya was looking to have DDP after he beat Rob Whittaker at this card, was looking to build a fight for them to fight just about 2 months later at UFC 293 in Sydney, Australia. This face-off is what happened. You remember, African brother of mine, I might be African, but I'm no brother of yours, all that. It was a really good face-off, heated moment. They ended up not fighting. DDP had a foot injury. He stayed out until UFC 297. So what happened was UFC 290, DDP wins. DDP doesn't take the fight at the Sydney, Australia card at UFC 293. Sean Strickland gets his title shot, absolutely embarrasses Izzy in front of his hometown crowd, or not hometown, but home region, takes the belt. Then he goes on to face DDP to defend his belt at UFC 297, Strickland versus DDP. DDP becomes champion. Izzy takes almost a year off, returns at UFC 305 in Perth, Western Australia. And here we are. Quick little history lesson for those of you that are not caught up. Now, I was watching the countdown for this because it just dropped. I was watching it over the weekend. And am I mistaken, or has the hype for this fight died down quite a bit? I feel like I'm not seeing enough of it on social media and enough talk about it. I'm seeing talk about Jones, Pereira, Aspinall, all these things, but Izzy versus DDP, in my eyes, from what I've been seeing on social media, has kind of been lost in the shuffle, which is interesting because this is one of the most hyped title fights for me of this year. There's going to be a lot of questions answered. Is Israel Adesanya over the hill? Is DDP on his way to becoming one of the best middleweights of all time? I'm just possibly. It just feels like this fight, because I'm super pumped for it, but it feels like the overall vibe of this fight, maybe it's because of the weak card, but it feels that this card is not as hyped up as it should be. Now, if you take a look at the UFC 305 card, it's not the deepest card we've ever seen. But typically, when you have such a grudge match main event between two very well-known fighters, usually the undercard doesn't matter so much. And it's not the worst undercard we've ever seen. Dricus du Plessis and Izzy Adesanya in the main event. Then you have honestly, in my opinion, a very weak co-main in Kai Kara France versus Steve Erceg, but they're playing to the local crowd. It's in Australia. You have a New Zealander going up against an Australian, I understand. And then down from there, you have Mateusz Gamrot, Dan Hooker, 5 versus top 15 or top 10, something like that, at 155, one of the UFC's premier divisions. And then you have Tuivasa versus Rozenstruik. Somehow Tuivasa keeps getting fights up in the rankings, even though all he does is lose by first round finish. And then you also have Li Jingliang returning from a neck injury. We haven't seen him in a while, going up against Carlos Prates, who is the guy that smoked cigarettes before his fight, just beat Chuck Buffalo by body shot knee. And then you also have Josh Kulibau, Walter Walker, Junior Tafa, Casey O'Neill, Jack Jenkins, Tom Nolan, Dom Reyes' brother. Like, it is a good card, but for some reason, I just feel that this card is being slept on. Maybe it's because of all the other things in the MMA news cycle right now, having to do with Conor. Is Conor going to fight again? is all the Pereira stuff that came up. I don't even really want to shed light on that, to be honest, but just to me, it seems that UFC 305 has been lost in the shuffle a little bit, which is interesting because this is one of the most interesting matchups, one of the most interesting storylines, one of the biggest questions will be answered type of fights for both guys and how good they are compared to each other. Sean Strickland, oh my God, Whitaker and Hamzat's coming up. Who's going to fight? Cannonier and Kyle Bohalio are coming up in like 2 weeks. Like, who's going to get the title fight against the winner? There's just so many questions, and I'm really intrigued by this matchup and by this fight, but it seems to be lost in the news cycle. So am I wrong about that? Am I missing something? Guys, let me know your thoughts down below. I want to know what you guys think about UFC 305. Is it underhyped considering how big of a matchup this is, how historical this could be for the division? Izzy might be over the hill. DDP might be one of the best middleweights ever. Let me know your thoughts down below. I want to know what your thoughts are on UFC 305 week card. Underhyped, overhyped, all of that. Like, subscribe. Thank you for watching. Hey guys, thank you for watching this video. Make sure to like, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. It really helps me out a lot. If you're interested in supporting the channel further, then become a channel member today for access to members only live streams, vlogs, and some other members perks. So click the link in the description down below or the join button on our channel homepage to become a member today. If you're interested in some non-MMA content from me, go check out my personal channel, Wyatt's World, and go check out my weekly comedy podcast, What's Up Bro, with Wyatt and Bo. Both of those are linked in the description down below. Go watch this suggested video, and we'll see you next time.